Sometimes it starts with an almost imperceptible whisper, a faint sense that the life spinning all around you is somehow missing its core, as if the music playing in the background of your days is out of tune. You notice it when silence falls and the world's noise dies down for a moment, leaving you alone with your thoughts. There, in the hush between your heartbeats, a subtle restlessness grows, impossible to name, difficult to suppress. The days flow in their familiar rhythm, full of endless distractions, glowing screens, quick pleasures, urgent demands. Yet somewhere beneath it all, a quiet ache persists, an ache for something deeper, something true. You might remember moments from your childhood when wisdom didn't seem so far away, when advice from your parents, a gentle correction, or a story told late at night still had power to shape your decisions. Back then, you felt protected, perhaps even adorned by those lessons, not yet weighed down by the choices that would come. But the world presses in with its offers, acceptance in exchange for compromise, comfort at the cost of conviction, adventure where the price is your peace. So many promises, so many voices. Come with us, they say. There's more to gain, more to see, more to take. And you realize that growing up means learning which invitations to ignore and which ones to let reach your heart. Wisdom is not always glamorous. She calls in the open, raising her voice where few choose to listen. Sometimes she's found on city streets or whispered from the lips of someone overlooked. Yet she always asks the same questions. How long will you love what is shallow? How long will you find delight in what is empty? There's a stubbornness in us that resists the call to look deeper. The heart, wounded and suspicious, prefers the comfort of familiar patterns. It's easier to laugh at caution, to mock restraint, to believe that knowledge is overrated, that experience, no matter how reckless, is its own kind of wisdom. But when storms come, as they always do, the foundation of your life is tested. Calamity, when it overtakes you, rarely announces itself with warnings. It sweeps in suddenly, overwhelming and absolute. It is then, in moments of real distress, that the shallowness of old answers is exposed. You look for something solid to hold on to. And if you've rejected wisdom's hand in the past, if you've dismissed her warnings, it can feel like no one answers your desperate cry. The emptiness returns, sharper this time, impossible to ignore. For those who have chosen to listen, however faintly, a different promise emerges. The assurance that safety, peace, and ease are possible, even in a world that thrives on anxiety. But these gifts are never forced on anyone. They're found only by those who value them above the fleeting thrill, who search for understanding as if it were buried treasure, who hunger for something beyond the surface. When you begin to turn your ear to the gentle instruction, to open your heart to wisdom's guidance, a new clarity arrives. There's comfort in knowing that knowledge comes from a higher place, that you're not expected to figure everything out on your own. You start to sense that success and protection are not rewards for cunning, but gifts for the upright, that a blameless path, however quiet, is watched over by someone who cares. Still, old temptations don't simply vanish. The way of the world is filled with crooked shortcuts, alluring words, invitations that promise escape but deliver entrapment. Every day presents a new crossroad. The option to follow the crowd into the shadows, or to keep to the slow, sunlit road of what's good. At times, the difference is subtle. It's in the way someone speaks, in the suggestion of a hidden advantage, in the subtle pressure to leave behind what you know is right. Each compromise seems small in the moment, but together they carry you far from the person you intended to be. Yet even in the heart of confusion, wisdom stands firm. She offers not just rules, but a way of seeing, a vision for what your life could become if you dared to trust in something greater than yourself. She shows you that discretion protects, that understanding guards, that the path you walk on can be transformed from a labyrinth of regret to a highway of hope. The stories of others echo this same truth. Those who chase after every pleasure, who believe every promise, find themselves lost, sometimes beyond recognition. But those who humble themselves, who admit the limits of their own understanding, begin to see new possibilities open before them. If you've ever felt the weight of repeated mistakes, the heavy silence after another compromise, then you know how precious even a glimmer of hope can be. The pain of being lost is real, but so is the possibility of being found. It all starts with a question that lingers long after the noise fades. What if there is a better way? What if the ache inside is not meant to be numbed, but answered? In that question, wisdom begins her work, and even in the midst of the world's clamor, her voice, once heard, becomes impossible to forget. As the days pass, it becomes clear that not all temptations announce themselves with fire and thunder. Most slip in quietly, wearing the mask of normalcy, disguised as simple pleasures or everyday choices. At first, their presence is almost invisible, a passing thought, a casual suggestion, a joke shared among friends that lingers a little too long in the imagination. The world around you hums with its own restless rhythm, and it's easy to join in, to let your steps fall in line with those ahead. There's comfort in belonging, in knowing you're not alone in your desires, your curiosities, your restless longings. But beneath this comfort is a subtle, unspoken pressure. Don't stand out. Don't question too much. Don't make things awkward by resisting what everyone else calls normal. When the group laughs, you laugh too, sometimes at things that once would have made you pause. Little by little, the lines blur between what's good and what's simply accepted. You find yourself swept up by the tide, caught in the current of other people's choices. The seductive power of fitting in, of sharing in collective amusements, can be far stronger than any direct invitation to do wrong. The promises come from every direction. Advertisements whisper of fulfillment just a click away. Movies and songs glorify passion and indulgence as the true marks of freedom. The culture insists that happiness is found in chasing every impulse, in sampling every pleasure without restraint. There are voices, some loud, some sly, offering shortcuts to contentment, insisting that what you desire right now is what you truly need. Why wait, they say? Why deny yourself what everyone else enjoys? Each suggestion seems harmless on its own, just a small step further into the crowd, a minor surrender to what's popular. And so, the slow drift begins. What started as innocent curiosity becomes routine. Habits quietly take root, and boundaries you once swore to keep are gently nudged back, then erased altogether. No one warns you when the shift occurs. There's no sign to mark the moment when pleasure stops being a gift and starts becoming a demand. The thrill of the new, the adrenaline of risk, the rush of approval, they promise much, but soon ask for more than you ever intended to give. You wake up one day and realize you are no longer steering your own course. You are moving wherever the current of the crowd decides to take you. Sometimes the warnings echo in your mind. The voice of an old friend, the advice of a parent, a memory of simpler times. But those voices are easy to drown out with noise, with more distractions, with the comfort of being just one face in the crowd. There is a certain safety in anonymity, in knowing that you're not the only one bending the rules, not the only one drifting a little further each day. You tell yourself it's only temporary, that you could turn back at any time. Yet the path becomes more familiar, the return less obvious, and the reasons to resist seem less compelling with each passing moment. This is how false promises make their home in a life, not as dramatic invasions, but as gentle intrusions, barely noticeable at first. They appeal to your senses, to your desire to feel alive, to your hunger for connection and validation. They invite you to believe that what's popular is what's right, that what everyone else is doing can't possibly be wrong. And as you follow along, you learn to silence doubts, to stifle any lingering sense of caution. After all, if everyone's walking the same path, how could it possibly lead anywhere dangerous? Yet even as you blend in, a quiet discomfort stirs. Sometimes it's a fleeting regret after another night spent chasing excitement, or a restless feeling that lingers when you're alone. The crowd can drown out many things, but it cannot silence the heart's deepest questions. Is this really enough? Why do moments of pleasure leave such long shadows? What are you becoming, step by step, as you trade your own convictions for borrowed desires? These questions never fully go away. They hover just out of sight, waiting for moments of honesty. The further you walk, the harder they are to answer. But something inside you remembers, a time before the pressure to conform, before the thrill of the crowd became a substitute for real joy. It's a faint memory, but it persists. Even as false promises multiply and new distractions arise, that quiet longing for something real, something lasting, continues to echo. And beneath the rush of daily life, you begin to wonder, what if the way everyone is going isn't the way you were meant to travel? There comes a point when the easy comfort of following the crowd gives way to a choice that no longer feels theoretical. It's no longer just about blending in, or laughing along, or indulging minor curiosities. Suddenly, there's a fork in the path. One road lit by the familiar glow of convenience, the other shrouded in uncertainty and quiet warning. The voices that once made it all seem harmless are still there, but now, for the first time, there's another voice rising within, a hesitant, almost timid whisper of conscience. You stand there for a moment, pulse quickening, feeling the weight of a decision that doesn't look monumental from the outside. To others, it might seem trivial, an invitation, a suggestive glance, an inside joke that goes too far, a secret shared that shouldn't be. The logic of the moment is seductive. It's nothing, you tell yourself, just this once. The words come easily, providing a cushion for your hesitation, a rationalization for crossing a line you once promised never to approach. The first step onto the darker path is almost imperceptible. There's no grand betrayal, no catastrophic event, only a small surrender, a quiet compromise. And yet, as soon as you move in that direction, something changes inside. The tension that lingers in your chest, that sense of unease, is your conscience refusing to let go. You try to ignore it, to drown it out with laughter or distraction, but it lingers stubbornly, echoing with every heartbeat. Each time you repeat that it's nothing, it becomes easier to say, even as it grows harder to believe. What makes this first choice so dangerous isn't its magnitude, but its subtlety. It teaches you that boundaries can be moved, that values can be bent, that guilt can be managed with excuses and silence. The world doesn't end when you cross that first invisible line. The sun still rises, friends still smile, life goes on. Yet beneath the surface, a tiny crack appears, hardly visible at first, but deepening with each quiet compromise. You begin to notice how easy it is to justify small actions when everyone else seems to be doing the same. You tell yourself you're still in control, that you can stop whenever you want, that you're not like those who've truly lost their way. Yet every time you push aside the warning in your chest, the voice of conscience grows softer, while the arguments for comfort, for pleasure, for ease become louder, more persuasive. The moment nothing serious slips past your lips, you've set a precedent for yourself. The next time, the hesitation is shorter. The time after that, it's gone entirely. You move forward, barely noticing that the road beneath your feet has changed. Harder, colder, edged with shadows. You keep walking, thinking you'll know when to turn back, but the path behind you is already lost in the darkness. Sometimes, in rare moments of stillness, regret flares up. A memory of who you wanted to be. A flash of discomfort at how easily you let go of old convictions. But you quickly learn to hush these thoughts, to focus on the present, to tell yourself that everyone stumbles, that no one expects perfection. You convince yourself that the rules were always too strict, that freedom means choosing for yourself, even if that choice comes at the expense of your peace. What no one tells you is that the first small surrender is rarely the last. Once you've convinced yourself that nothing bad happened, you open the door to 1,000 other rationalizations. The heart adapts, reshaping its boundaries to fit your new reality, growing comfortable in places it once feared to tread. And though the world goes on and you remain unseen in the crowd, inside you know something essential has shifted, a truth you may not be ready to face, but cannot fully escape. As you walk deeper into the shadowed road, the uneasy alliance between desire and conscience grows more fragile. The next invitation, the next chance to say yes, feels less like a test and more like a habit. The path ahead is still open, but the way back becomes more distant with each passing step, and the darkness feels a little more familiar every day. It's astonishing how quickly what once appeared as harmless fun transforms into something far more consuming, far less innocent. The first few steps are thrilling, light-hearted even, filled with a rush that seems to confirm every promise whispered by the world. There's a sense of invincibility that takes hold, as if pleasure is its own shield, as if the pursuit of satisfaction can't possibly carry consequences when everyone around you is doing the same. Nights are spent in the glow of fleeting excitement, each new indulgence bringing a jolt of energy, a temporary sense of being alive. The fear that haunted your first transgression recedes, replaced by a growing confidence in your ability to keep everything under control. But as time goes on, the returns begin to diminish. The pleasures that once lit up your world lose their luster. The laughter grows hollow. The excitement dulls. What once took only a small dose to satisfy you now demands more time, more energy, more of your soul. You find yourself chasing the next thrill, always searching for a spark that fades as quickly as it appears. Each pursuit promises relief from the restlessness gnawing inside, but the satisfaction slips through your fingers, gone before you can grasp it. In the quiet moments that follow, the cost becomes impossible to ignore. The emptiness, once just a background ache, settles in with new weight. You notice it most at night, when the noise fades and you're left alone with your thoughts. The pleasure that once seemed to fill the void now reveals how much deeper the void has grown. There is a loneliness that pleasure cannot reach, a sense of separation from your own heart. Attempts to fill that gap with more excitement only deepen the wound, and each time the emptiness returns, it feels sharper, more accusing. It's here, in the aftermath, that you begin to sense the true nature of the bargain you've made. The things that promised freedom have slowly become chains. The confidence you once felt in your ability to walk away now looks like denial, a willful blindness to the ways you've lost control. Habits take root, growing in the shadows, twisting your priorities and your self-respect. You become a stranger to yourself, wondering when exactly you stopped caring about the person you used to be. You start to see it in small ways: the avoidance of honest conversation, the irritation at anyone who questions your choices, the restless anxiety that hums beneath every attempt to distract yourself. Others may not notice the changes at first, but inside, you know what's happening. Your patience runs thin, your temper shortens, your capacity for kindness ebbs away. The pleasure that was supposed to liberate you now demands tribute: your energy, your peace, your integrity. It insists on being served, shaping your days around its hunger. You justify your choices, clinging to the illusion that you're still in control, but the evidence grows harder to ignore. Sleep becomes less restful, relationships grow strained. The inner sense of wholeness you once took for granted erodes bit by bit. Disappointment seeps into every corner. Each attempt to reclaim the joy you once felt ends with a heavier sense of regret. You wonder why you're more tired, why your spirit feels heavier, why nothing seems to satisfy for long. The world still offers its distractions, but they are no longer enough. A slow grief creeps in, a mourning not just for lost innocence, but for the loss of something essential, something you can't quite name. The mirage of endless pleasure has turned into a desert, and everywhere you turn, you find the same bitter aftertaste. In the moments when honesty prevails, you're forced to admit what you've been avoiding. That pleasure, unanchored from meaning, always becomes a prison. That what begins as freedom ends in dependency, and that the price of chasing every desire is a life emptied of purpose. The cost is subtle at first: missed opportunities, forgotten dreams, small lies told to yourself and others. But over time, these costs accumulate, leaving you hollow, anxious, and hungry for something real. The realization settles in with a cold clarity. The illusion has run its course, leaving you standing amid the ruins of your own making, still surrounded by temptations, but haunted now by the knowledge that nothing they offer can make you whole again. And yet, beneath the weight of disappointment, a stubborn ember remains. A faint hope that not all is lost, that the story can still change, that even now a different road might be possible, if only you can find the courage to seek it. Desire, when left unchecked, grows into something far more powerful than the innocent longing that first awakened in the quiet corners of your mind. At first, it feels like a secret you can control, a hidden part of yourself that you can indulge or ignore at will. But soon, it takes on a life of its own, pressing in at unexpected moments, shaping your choices and coloring your thoughts. It becomes a force that whispers promises of comfort, of escape, of fleeting euphoria. Yet with every promise kept, it weaves another thread into the net that holds you captive. The conflict is relentless. Reason tries to speak, a rational voice urging caution, recalling the lessons you once treasured, the boundaries you swore to keep. You remember what life felt like before the chase began, when your heart was still whole and your conscience clear. But the desire is insistent, crafty, always waiting for a moment of weakness. It knows how to twist your memories to make the past seem less appealing, the boundaries less necessary. It thrives in solitude, feeding off your isolation, convincing you that surrender is easier than resistance. There's a war inside you now, a battle waged between the wisdom of restraint and the urgency of impulse. Each day brings its own temptations, some obvious, others disguised in harmless distractions. You might catch yourself drifting during a conversation, thoughts wandering to fantasies you never intended to entertain. You may find your eyes lingering too long, your curiosity sliding into fixation. It happens quietly, almost automatically, until you realize your mind is no longer your own. With every internal struggle, the heart grows weary. Shame creeps in, heavy and persistent, wrapping itself around your best intentions. You try to fight, to summon willpower, to impose rules and routines that once brought you comfort. Sometimes you succeed, if only for a while. But desire has learned your rhythms. It waits until you're tired, stressed, alone, then presses harder. Each failure leaves a bruise on your spirit, deepening the sense that you are losing ground, that you are powerless against this enemy within. The pain isn't just moral or emotional, it's physical too. A tension in the chest, a heaviness behind your eyes, a dull ache that refuses to fade. Desire alters your perception of reality, shrinking your world down to its most basic cravings, distorting your view of what matters. It promises satisfaction, but delivers only a temporary high, leaving you emptier than before. You start to question your own strength, your worth, your ability to ever be free. Relationships suffer. Trust erodes, not just with others, but with yourself. You find it harder to look people in the eye, harder to accept kindness without suspicion. You build walls, invent excuses, hide the growing fracture within your soul. Every secret kept, every truth avoided, reinforces the prison. You want to believe you can manage it, that no one else will ever know. But the cost of hiding becomes a burden that weighs you down more each day. Deep down, you recognize that the real enemy is not outside you, but within. A shadow in your own heart that grows with every compromise, every unguarded moment. You see how desire distorts love, turns affection into appetite, reduces beauty to consumption. The more you chase, the less you find. The more you try to feed the hunger, the greater it grows. Peace slips away, replaced by a constant restlessness, a gnawing dissatisfaction that no pleasure can soothe. Still, there is a part of you that refuses to give in completely. You sense, however faintly, that this is not who you are meant to be. The memory of innocence, of simplicity, of joy untainted by regret lingers at the edges of your consciousness. In your quietest moments, you ache for release, for a return to wholeness, for the freedom that comes from a heart at peace with itself. But the conflict rages on, drawing you further into the labyrinth of your own desires, even as you long for the strength to break free. Somewhere in the dim corridors of your mind, a gentle but persistent voice begins to make itself heard. It's quieter than the noise of craving, softer than the flood of distraction, yet it refuses to be silenced. At first, it's only a question that surfaces in the pauses between indulgence and regret, a hesitant wondering if this is really all there is, if this path you're on is leading anywhere you'd truly want to go. You try to ignore it, to lose yourself in routine, but the voice lingers. Sometimes it sounds like the echo of your younger self, remembering what it felt like to wake up with a clear mind and an unburdened spirit. Sometimes it's the faint reminder of words spoken long ago, an encouragement, a warning, a plea to hold on to what matters. The memories are tinged with longing, and you find yourself drawn back to moments when you still believed in something pure, when hope felt tangible and goodness seemed within reach. This voice, the voice of conscience, doesn't accuse or condemn. It invites you to look honestly at your own reflection. There's a fragile honesty in these moments, a vulnerability that feels both painful and strangely relieving. You begin to realize how much of your energy has gone into hiding, into pretending that everything is fine, into constructing elaborate justifications for decisions that leave you emptier every time. You wonder when exactly you started choosing comfort over truth, numbness over meaning. The more you listen, the clearer the questions become. Where is this taking me? What will become of me if nothing changes? There's a sobering clarity in facing the consequences of small, repeated choices. You see that the emptiness inside isn't just a lack of pleasure, but a loss of self, a slow erosion of the things that once gave your life direction and purpose. You begin to fear not only where you're headed, but what you might be leaving behind with every step. Doubt settles in, not as an enemy, but as a companion on the journey toward self-awareness. You're no longer sure that desire alone can sustain you, that surface joys can fill the depths of longing within. You catch glimpses of others, people who seem to move through life with peace, whose eyes are untroubled by hidden battles. You wonder what they know, what choices they've made, how they learned to resist the pull that now holds you captive. There are moments when you want to turn back, to reclaim the ground you've lost, but fear and shame hold you in place. What if you're too far gone? What if the voice of conscience is just another illusion, one more promise that will go unfulfilled? Yet beneath these doubts, a stubborn hope takes root, a hope that maybe, just maybe, you can still change, that the road you're on is not a prison, but a passage, a place of learning rather than condemnation. You begin to test the edges of your resolve, experimenting with small acts of defiance against the cycle of temptation and regret. You say no to yourself, even if only once, and feel the faint stirrings of strength. You search for meaning in the little things, a kind word, a moment of silence, a memory of laughter that wasn't shadowed by guilt. These glimmers are fragile, easy to overlook, but they are real. The journey is not dramatic, nor is it quick. But each time you listen to the voice of conscience, it grows more familiar, less frightening. You realize that true change never starts with condemnation, but with awareness, the willingness to see things as they are, and to believe that something better is possible. The darkness has not yet lifted. The struggle has not yet ended. But in these first flickers of honesty, you sense the beginning of a way out. The path ahead remains uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, you find yourself longing for light. There are days when the resolve to change feels almost within reach, when the voice of conscience is loud enough to guide your choices, and you tell yourself this time will be different. But inevitably, the cycle tightens its grip. Old habits, familiar temptations, the relentless ache of longing, they all conspire to draw you back, testing the limits of your willpower and exposing the raw edges of your vulnerability. You promise yourself that you won't make the same mistake again, that you've learned your lesson, that the line you crossed before will not be crossed again. But desire is patient, waiting for you to grow tired, to let your guard slip, to seek comfort when the day grows dark and lonely. At first, the slip feels minor, just a fleeting return to old patterns. You rationalize it, tell yourself it's a small thing, easily forgiven, quickly forgotten. But with each repetition, the shame builds, heavy and suffocating. You begin to dread the quiet moments when you are left alone with your thoughts, because that is when regret comes calling, relentless and merciless. The hope that once seemed possible now feels naive, and the voice of conscience, so recently awakened, grows quieter beneath the weight of disappointment. You watch yourself make choices you swore you'd never make again, and each time you do, something inside you breaks a little more. The battle becomes not just about resisting temptation, but about wrestling with your own sense of worth. Guilt eats away at your confidence, convincing you that you are fundamentally flawed, that your efforts at change are doomed from the start. You see yourself trapped in a loop, craving, indulgence, shame, resolve, and back again, unable to escape, unable to imagine freedom. This is the depth of internal struggle, where even your best intentions seem powerless against the force of habit. You feel isolated, convinced that no one else could understand the war raging within. On the outside, you maintain appearances, wear a mask of normalcy, but inside you are unraveling. The contrast is stark. Laughter among friends is shadowed by self-loathing. Brief moments of joy are swallowed by the certainty that you are living a double life. Sometimes you try to reach out, to confess, to ask for help, to share your burden, but the words get caught in your throat, choked by fear of judgment or rejection. You convince yourself that you must handle this alone, that admitting weakness would only make things worse. So you retreat further into yourself, hoping that willpower alone will someday be enough to break the cycle. Yet every failed attempt deepens your sense of hopelessness, and the walls close in a little more. Nights become the hardest. The darkness outside mirrors the turmoil within. You lie awake, replaying your failures, haunted by memories of better days. You beg for relief, for some way to silence the relentless self-criticism, but relief never comes. Instead, you wake each morning a little more exhausted, a little less hopeful, a little more convinced that escape is impossible. Shame becomes a constant companion, settling in your bones, coloring your every thought. It whispers that you are beyond help, beyond forgiveness, that this pit you've dug for yourself is now your permanent home. Despair blurs the line between what you do and who you are, convincing you that your identity is forever marked by your mistakes. In this place, even the faintest glimmer of hope feels like a cruel trick, a promise that can never be fulfilled. And yet, amid the despair, there remains a restless yearning, a distant memory of freedom, a stubborn refusal to let go of the dream that things could be different. It is faint, nearly drowned out by the noise of defeat, but it endures. The struggle is far from over, the battle far from won. You are lost, yes, but not yet fully surrendered. The story continues even as you stumble through the deepest valley, searching for a way back to yourself. There is a unique loneliness that comes when you realize no one else can enter this battle for you. Friends may offer sympathy, loved ones might sense your sorrow, but they cannot see the storm raging within. Every attempt to explain, to share, to seek understanding falters before the enormity of your grief. You feel unworthy of compassion, convinced that your struggle sets you apart, isolates you behind a barrier invisible yet impenetrable. Even in a crowded room, the loneliness is profound, a sense that you are surrounded and yet completely unseen. Desperation wells up, a silent scream echoing through your mind. You want to call out, to beg for rescue, but pride and shame weave together, binding your tongue. You wonder if anyone could really understand, if anyone would even care if they knew the truth. The world moves on, indifferent, while you remain stranded in your private wilderness, burdened by questions without answers. There are moments when the ache is too great to contain. In the privacy of your room, in the safety of solitude, tears come unbidden. A raw, wordless plea for mercy, for relief, for release from the torment you can no longer bear. You cry out to the heavens, to the darkness, to whatever force might be listening, hoping that someone, something, will hear your anguish. It is a prayer born not of ritual or tradition, but of utter desperation, a cry for help when every other option has failed. In that moment, the silence that answers seems infinite. Doubt seeps in, whispering that no one is there, that no answer will come, that your pain is insignificant against the vast indifference of the universe. You feel invisible, abandoned, your voice swallowed up by the void. And yet, as the sobs subside and exhaustion settles in, there is an unexpected stillness, a fragile pause in the storm. It is not comfort, not yet, but a faint sense that your anguish has been witnessed, even if only by the emptiness itself. This is the crucible of loneliness, the place where hope and despair wrestle for your heart. The longing for connection becomes overwhelming, a desperate need to be seen, to be known, to be loved in the midst of your brokenness. The temptation to give up, to close yourself off forever, is strong, but something deeper remains. A flicker of longing, a stubborn refusal to surrender entirely to the darkness. In the aftermath of the storm, as you lie awake staring at the ceiling, drained and emptied, a question rises from the depths. Is there anyone who can reach me here? Is there any light that can find its way into this night? You have no answers, only the rawness of your plea and the aching silence that follows. Yet in that silence, for the first time, you sense the possibility, however distant, that being fully seen, even in your pain, might be the first step toward healing. The journey forward is uncertain, the night far from over, but your cry has been released, and with it, the faintest hope that you are not truly alone. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the darkness begins to thin. It does not happen in a sudden burst of revelation or some triumphant rescue. Instead, hope comes quietly, seeping into your world like the faintest light before dawn. Gentle, persistent, impossible to ignore once you notice it. Perhaps it's a verse you remember from childhood, a phrase tucked away in the folds of memory. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The words resurface in a quiet moment, unbidden yet strangely comforting, carrying with them the warmth of home and the echo of love. Or maybe it's the steady presence of someone in your life, a mentor, a friend, or even a stranger, whose simple kindness breaks through your isolation. Their words aren't grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's only the patience in their listening, the steadiness in their eyes. They ask nothing of you except honesty. They are not there to fix you, but their existence is proof that care is possible, that understanding still has a place in the world. Their example becomes a silent invitation to trust again, to believe that change might begin with the smallest gesture of faith. Other times, the spark is lit from within, a sudden clarity, the gentle nudge of conscience that refuses to give up. It's the moment you find yourself reaching for a Bible, not out of habit or duty, but because the hunger for truth has become too strong to ignore. You read words that once seemed distant, and this time something shifts. the ancient wisdom begins to feel alive, not just as a set of rules, but as a promise. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. The line stays with you, repeating itself in your mind, offering a new path where before there was only a dead end. In these first fragile steps toward wisdom, there is no lightning bolt, no instant transformation. There is only a growing willingness to listen, to the gentle rebuke of conscience, to the encouragement of someone who sees more in you than you see in yourself, to the still, small voice that speaks in the silence. You begin to notice patterns you had missed before, to recognize the futility of chasing pleasures that leave you emptier every time. The wisdom you encounter does not shame you. Instead, it invites you to a life with more meaning, more depth, more peace than you had thought possible. Even as you struggle with old habits and recurring doubts, the presence of hope changes the atmosphere within. The longing for healing, for something true, is no longer a distant dream, but a possibility you can almost touch. Each time you choose honesty over hiding, humility over pride, you feel a bit lighter. The struggle is not over. There are relapses, temptations, moments when you falter. But now there is a direction. Wisdom begins to guide you like a lantern on a dark path, showing you just enough to take the next step. Sometimes it is as simple as making a new choice in an old situation, walking away from a temptation, reaching out for help, allowing yourself to be vulnerable. You begin to understand that wisdom is not just about knowledge, but about trusting a wisdom greater than your own, letting go of the illusion that you must control everything. There is comfort in surrender, a strange peace in admitting that you cannot do it alone. These first rays of hope do not banish all darkness, but they reveal that you are not trapped as completely as you once thought. The journey ahead is still long, but you are not as lost as you feared. You have heard the call of wisdom, and even in your weakness, you find yourself responding. The light grows stronger with each step, and for the first time in a long while, you begin to believe that restoration is not only possible, it has already begun. The journey out of darkness is nothing like the fantasy of instant transformation. Real change, the kind that penetrates to the core, does not come cheaply or easily. It demands more than a burst of willpower or a momentary resolve. It requires a steady, painful unlearning, a surrender of comforts that once felt indispensable. Each step forward is fraught with resistance, both from the world around you, eager to pull you back into old rhythms, and from the quieter rebellions of your own heart, reluctant to give up what has become so familiar. At first, there's a hope that the new wisdom you found will make the path smooth, that the insight of yesterday will shield you from today's temptations. But almost immediately, you discover that the habits built over years do not bow to revelation. They must be dismantled piece by piece, sometimes painfully, always with effort. You stumble more than you stride, finding that old desires return at the slightest provocation, that progress can feel fragile and uncertain. The world, for its part, rarely cheers for your transformation. It questions, mocks, tempts, reminding you of how easy it would be to slip back into the comfortable mediocrity you once knew. The price of change is paid in daily decisions, often small, sometimes excruciating. There are losses you didn't anticipate, relationships strained by your new boundaries, invitations declined, moments of loneliness that sting in ways indulgence never did. The satisfaction of fleeting pleasure is replaced by the long, slow ache of longing for something more lasting, and patience becomes a discipline rather than a virtue you admire from afar. At times, the effort seems disproportionate to the rewards. You miss the numbness that used to blur the edges of pain, the ease of living unexamined. But wisdom is never free. Its value lies in what it costs. To see clearly is to grieve what you once called happiness. To live honestly is to risk the rejection of those who are content to stay asleep. Every day you choose a higher road, you feel the friction of letting go. Letting go of old stories you told yourself, of excuses that made surrender seem noble, of the identity shaped by the approval of others. Sometimes you feel like you're walking against the current, fighting not just habits, but the gravity of your own desires. Yet slowly, something shifts. Each hard-won victory, no matter how small, becomes a brick in the foundation of a new life. The pain of growth gives way, in moments, to a quiet satisfaction, a sense of integrity returning, the first glimpses of wholeness. You learn to find comfort in discipline, to savor the clarity that comes from saying no to what would diminish you. Wisdom begins to feel like an old friend, its voice growing more familiar, more persuasive, outshining the hollow allure of shortcuts. You realize that the greatest changes happen not with a single act of courage, but through 1,000 small acts of faithfulness. Choices made in secret, victories unseen, kindness shown to yourself when you stumble yet again. In the beginning, the cost of change feels unbearable. In time, you begin to see that the real cost was always in staying the same. The people around you might never notice the depth of the struggle or the height of the climb, but within, you know how hard-won each step has been. Wisdom, once a distant ideal, becomes a living companion, its presence a continual reminder that what is valuable is always hard-won. The illusions you've shed may leave you feeling exposed, but they also leave you lighter, more free. The path of real transformation is steep and sometimes lonely, but its rewards, though slow in coming, are deeper and more enduring than anything the old life could offer. Every day you pay the price, but every day, bit by bit, you become someone new, someone whole, someone true. True change, once set in motion, becomes an unfolding journey, marked not just by inspiration, but by the painstaking work of daily choices. The idea of a new life might begin with a flash of insight or a single act of courage, but it is sustained by discipline, a steady, almost stubborn commitment to walk a different path, one step at a time. You wake each morning knowing that old patterns will press in, that habits forged in years of indulgence will not fade at your command. The mind rebels against unfamiliar routines, longing for the ease of autopilot, for the familiar comfort of past escapes. So you start small, almost cautiously. You build guardrails around your weakest moments, learning to recognize the places and times when temptation strikes hardest. Perhaps you set limits on your time alone, or reshape your daily schedule to fill the idle hours that once became traps. You avoid certain images, mute voices that once whispered you deeper into compromise, delete shortcuts to old distractions. With each boundary drawn, you feel a flicker of power returning, a fragile confidence that perhaps, this time, you are not entirely helpless. The first victories are almost invisible, a night passed without giving in, a conversation navigated honestly, a moment of rest found without the need to numb. These moments are easy to overlook, easy to dismiss as insignificant, but within them is the proof that change is possible. You learn to celebrate these small triumphs, allowing them to quiet the doubts that linger, to counter the old story that you are destined to fail. Yet discipline is never a straight line. The old desires return, sometimes with double force, as if angered by your refusal to be ruled. The triggers that used to catch you off guard become more cunning, appearing when you're tired, stressed, or simply caught off guard by a sudden pang of loneliness. There are days when all the progress seems undone in a single moment, when you give in once more and the shame comes rushing back, sharp and unforgiving. The voice of defeat tells you that it's hopeless, that you will always be this person, that freedom is an illusion dangled out of reach. But now, something is different. The practice of discipline has taught you that failure is not the end, only a turn in the road. Instead of spiraling into despair, you begin to ask new questions. What triggered this slip? How can I prepare for it next time? Where can I seek help instead of hiding in shame? Each fall becomes not just a setback, but a lesson, an opportunity to refine your strategy, to rebuild the guardrails stronger, to reach out to those who can walk with you through the hardest moments. Support becomes essential: a mentor, a trusted friend, a faith community, the quiet strength found in daily prayer or meditation. You learn to share your struggles honestly, discovering that vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a tool for growth. The encouragement of others, the wisdom of those who have walked this path before, becomes a lifeline. Accountability, once feared, now feels like a gift. As weeks turn to months, the victories grow in number, and the setbacks, while still painful, no longer feel fatal. You begin to recognize the slow, steady building of new habits, the way discipline rewires your mind and strengthens your heart. There are days when freedom feels natural, when joy bubbles up unbeaten, when gratitude replaces regret. And there are still days of struggle, days when you stumble, but now you know how to begin again. Discipline, you realize, is not about being perfect. It is about showing up again and again for your own healing. With each cycle of success and failure, hope deepens its roots. You begin to trust the process, to see that the journey is not measured only by victories, but by faithfulness in returning to the path after every fall. It is in these imperfect, honest efforts that true change takes hold, and step by step, the life you long for grows more real, more possible, with every day you choose to begin anew. Every genuine attempt to build a new life is marked by the tension between two worlds, the bright promise of freedom and the persistent pull of the shadows left behind. In the light, you find hope, a sense of possibility, the faint but growing belief that you are not defined by your past. But lurking always at the edges, like ghosts just out of sight, are the old cravings, memories of the pleasures that once ruled you, and the comfort of slipping back into the known, however destructive it might be. This interstruggle is not just a matter of willpower, it is a battleground where your mind and your heart often seem to fight on opposing sides. The mind, freshly awakened to wisdom, assembles reasons to continue on the new path. It rehearses lessons learned, counts the costs of old choices, clings to every small victory. It can recite truths that real joy is found in discipline, that integrity is worth the pain, that peace is more precious than excitement. The mind strategizes, prepares, gathers tools for the journey. It reminds you daily of what's at stake and why the struggle is worth it. Yet the heart is slower to follow. The heart remembers the taste of easy escape, the warmth of moments where longing was quickly sated, the thrill of breaking rules in secret. It holds on to the idea that somewhere in the old life a piece of happiness was left behind, and if only you could go back for it, the ache would finally disappear. The mind can argue for freedom, but the heart is haunted by nostalgia, whispering that the new life, orderly, disciplined, at times lonely, lacks the fire that once made everything feel so vivid. The fight becomes fiercest in the quiet hours, when defenses are low and the world around you grows still. Thoughts drift back to places you've left behind, people you no longer see, habits you've tried to bury. You replay old scenes in your mind, sometimes with longing, sometimes with regret. There are days when the yearning is so strong it blurs your vision, when the discipline you've worked so hard to build feels brittle, inadequate against the power of memory and desire. But there are also moments of clarity, when the light shines through the cracks and you remember why you started this journey. You feel the growing strength in your soul, the ability to pause, to breathe, to let the longing rise and fall without letting it dictate your actions. You see the contrast between the fleeting highs of the past and the deeper contentment that now begins to root in your heart. These are the moments when you realize that the pain of discipline, the ache of letting go, is not a punishment, but a doorway to something more real. Still, the shadows don't disappear. Even as you walk in the light, there are days when you stumble, when the heart protests, when old habits seem easier than facing the challenges of growth. The temptation to split yourself in two, to live one way in the open, another in secret, remains strong. You may find yourself negotiating, bargaining with yourself, testing the boundaries you worked so hard to set. It is a delicate dance between honesty and self-deception, between courage and comfort. But over time, the war between heart and mind begins to shift. The mind's truths, repeated and lived out, start to seep into the heart, transforming longing into gratitude for what you are building, rather than what you've left behind. The heart, once addicted to excitement and secrecy, begins to yearn for peace, for authenticity, for the kind of love and joy that don't require hiding. You learn that both light and shadow are part of the journey, that freedom is not the absence of temptation, but the growing strength to choose well, even when desire whispers otherwise. In this struggle, you discover a new kind of wholeness, the ability to stand in the light while acknowledging the pull of the dark, to let your heart mourn what is lost without surrendering to it. You realize that the path forward is not a straight line, but a continual weaving of mind and heart, a daily choice to live with integrity even when the shadows call. And with every choice, the light grows stronger, the shadows recede, and your true self emerges from the struggle, marked by both the scars of battle and the radiance of hope. There are moments on this journey when words fail and the struggle within grows too heavy to bear alone. It is in these times when discipline falters and hope feels fragile that the heart turns inward, searching for solace not in strength or strategy, but in surrender. Here, in the hush that follows another fall or a night of wrestling with old shadows, you discover the quiet power of prayer, not as empty ritual or desperate last resort, but as the most honest conversation you can have with your own soul and with God. Prayer begins as a whisper, a stumbling attempt to give voice to the ache inside. It is less about eloquence and more about truth, a confession of need, a letting go of pride, a willingness to admit that you cannot do this alone. In prayer, you name your failures not to wallow in them, but to bring them into the light, trusting that there is mercy waiting for every wounded place. The act of speaking, or even silently forming the words in your mind, breaks the spell of shame. You stop hiding from yourself, and for the first time, you feel seen, even in your weakness. Repentance, too, is not a performance for an audience or a bargaining chip to secure forgiveness. It is the art of turning away from old patterns toward something truer. It is a deliberate, sometimes painful, acknowledgement that your choices have brought harm to yourself, to others, to your relationship with the sacred. In this turning, you refuse the comfort of excuses and blame. You take ownership, not out of self-punishment, but because you sense that healing is only possible when you are fully honest. These moments of prayer and repentance are intensely private, yet they connect you to something far greater than yourself. The ancient words you once heard, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me," become your own, breathed out in hope and longing. Sometimes all you can manage is a single sentence, a plea for help in your weakest hour. Sometimes the prayer is a stream of tears, unspoken, but no less understood. What unfolds in this dialogue is not always immediate relief. Often, it is a slow unburdening, a gradual softening of the heart. You begin to sense a presence that does not recoil at your brokenness, that is patient with your questions, that waits with gentle persistence for you to trust again. The barriers you've built, out of pride, fear, disappointment, begin to crack. You realize that God does not require perfection, only honesty, that even your most feeble prayers are heard. Over time, you discover that prayer and repentance are not one-time events, but a rhythm, a way of living. You return to them again and again, especially in moments of weakness, using them not to escape the struggle, but to enter it more deeply, with new courage. You learn that grace is not earned by your efforts, but received in surrender. That forgiveness is not just a feeling, but a gift that grows every time you open yourself in humility. In the quiet after prayer, there is often a new clarity, a softening of anxiety, a return of hope. You carry the memory of mercy into the next battle, the next decision, the next dark night. The art of this inner conversation is not about perfect words or flawless resolve, but about coming home, to yourself, to God, to the truth that you are loved even in your weakest moments. Through prayer and repentance, you begin to trust that you are not walking this path alone, and that in every confession, every plea for help, there is the beginning of real freedom. For all the strength required to resist temptation, for all the effort spent in discipline and self-examination, nothing is more transformative or more difficult than truly accepting forgiveness. The mind can grasp the concept easily enough. You may have heard it spoken 1,000 times, read about grace and mercy, believed in theory that the past can be left behind. But living it, letting it soak into the deepest places where regret and shame reside, is another matter entirely. You may find yourself returning again and again to the memory of your failures, replaying the moments you wish you could undo, questioning whether anyone, God, another person, even yourself, could really wipe the slate clean. Shame is a stubborn companion, whispering that your flaws are too deep, your mistakes too frequent, your wounds too old to be healed. The cycle seems unbreakable. Stumble, confess, resolve, fall again. Each round reinforces the belief that maybe this is just who you are, that maybe freedom is for others, not for you. But then, sometimes in the quiet of prayer or the gentle voice of someone who sees past your worst moments, forgiveness begins to break through. It does not come as a feeling of sudden euphoria, but as a gradual lightening, a lifting of weight you'd forgotten you were carrying. It asks for nothing but honesty. There is no demand for perfection, only an invitation to receive what cannot be earned. To accept forgiveness is to lay down the weapons of self-judgment, to stop arguing with the past, to allow yourself to be seen without defense or disguise. It is an act of humility, to trust that grace is real, that you are not the sum of your failures, that a new story is possible even now. The moment you risk believing this, the grip of shame loosens. You discover that the chains were never as strong as they seemed, that the door to the cage was unlocked all along. This experience is rarely linear. You may feel forgiveness in your heart one day and lose sight of it the next. Doubt will return, old accusations will echo. But with every return to grace, the truth settles deeper. You learn to live with open hands, letting mercy reach the parts of you most in need. When you forgive yourself, truly and without reservation, the way you see others changes too. Compassion grows where harshness once ruled. Judgment softens, replaced by a gentler strength. The freedom that comes from forgiveness is not just an escape from guilt, but a new energy for life. You are able to try again, to risk vulnerability, to reach out to others in ways you never could while burdened by regret. You begin to understand that freedom is not perfection, but movement, forward, outward, upward. The past no longer dictates your present or your future. The circle of shame and striving is broken by the simple, powerful reality that you are loved and accepted as you are. With this knowledge comes peace, and with peace, the courage to keep walking. Forgiveness becomes both a foundation and a door, a place to stand, and an invitation to move into a life no longer defined by what you've done, but by who you are becoming. It is here, in the acceptance of mercy, that the journey to lasting freedom truly begins. There comes a moment, somewhere further along the journey, when the past no longer feels like a weight dragging you down, but instead becomes a source of unexpected wisdom. You look back, almost cautiously at first, afraid that the old memories might pull you under again. But as you revisit the landscape of your mistakes, your failures, your repeated returns to what once held you captive, something is different now. The sting of regret is still there, but it's tempered by perspective, by the realization that every wrong turn, every fall, every painful consequence has carried within it a lesson you couldn't have learned any other way. At first, it is difficult to see the value in your failures. The human heart recoils from pain, wanting only to forget and move on. But healing asks for more than amnesia. It invites you to see clearly, to sift through the ashes for what remains true and good. As you do, you begin to notice patterns, the ways you justified old choices, the fears that drove you, the emptiness that fueled your search for comfort in the wrong places. Each insight is hard-won, but it brings clarity, dissolving the illusion that your struggles were meaningless. Gradually, your relationship with your past shifts. You stop seeing it as a list of disqualifications and begin to recognize it as the ground on which you now stand, solid, real, shaped by experience. The things you once tried to hide become evidence of survival, of the courage it took to keep going. You find that the places where you broke are often the places where compassion is born, where you are able to offer understanding to others walking their own hard roads. This new way of looking back doesn't erase the pain or excuse the harm done, but it transforms it. Regret softens into wisdom, and shame gives way to humility. You see how each error forced you to ask deeper questions, to wrestle with what matters, to shed illusions that could never satisfy. The journey through darkness, you realize, was never just about escape, but about discovery, about finding new values, new priorities, new reasons to hope. With this perspective, your heart begins to change in ways you never expected. The pursuit of fleeting pleasure is replaced by the desire for meaning, for authenticity, for connection that isn't rooted in secrecy or shame. The frantic chase for validation gives way to a quieter confidence, a trust that your worth is not determined by your worst moments. You find yourself less quick to judge, more willing to forgive, not just others, but yourself. The past, once a prison, becomes a classroom. Its lessons, painful as they were, reveal the truth that real strength is born of brokenness, that character is shaped not by avoiding failure, but by learning from it. You become grateful, in a strange way, for the journey you never would have chosen. Grateful because it has made you who you are, capable of empathy, resilience, and a kind of joy that does not depend on circumstances. As you continue forward, the lessons of the past walk with you, not as ghosts to be feared, but as guides. They remind you of how far you've come, how much you've changed, and how every mistake can be redeemed in the light of new wisdom. You carry these lessons not as burdens, but as gifts, quiet proof that even the hardest roads can lead to a heart made new. The road to freedom, though deeply personal, was never meant to be walked alone. As you move through the twists and turns of transformation, stumbling, rising, doubting, hoping, you come to recognize the profound importance of those who walk beside you. Sometimes their presence is obvious, a trusted friend who listens without judgment, a mentor whose wisdom steadies you in moments of confusion, a community that holds you up when your own strength falters. Other times the support is quieter, hidden in a timely message, a remembered scripture, or the silent encouragement of someone who simply refuses to give up on you. It is in the hardest moments, when temptation screams and shame presses in, when fatigue threatens to undo all your progress, that the value of support becomes undeniable. You learn that there are people whose faith in your growth is greater than your own, whose steady reminders of truth keep you anchored when your mind is clouded by doubt. Their stories of struggle and resilience become signposts, their compassion a gentle hand that pulls you back when you were drifting. Mentorship, in whatever form it appears, provides more than advice or instruction. It offers a mirror for your own journey, showing you both how far you have come and how much farther you can go. Through the example of others, those who have walked the same dark valleys and found a way through, you are reminded that setbacks are not the end, that failure is part of the process, that you are not uniquely broken. Their honesty about their own struggles makes room for yours. Their hope plants seeds of possibility where despair once grew. Sometimes this guidance comes through living voices, conversations that last deep into the night, gentle rebukes that redirect your steps, prayers whispered on your behalf when you cannot pray for yourself. At other times, it arrives through ancient words, the wisdom of Scripture, stories of imperfect people transformed by grace, promises that shine like lanterns in the dark. You find comfort in knowing that countless others have faced the same battles, that their victories and defeats can light your own way forward. This web of connection, this unseen network of support, slowly teaches you that asking for help is not weakness, but wisdom. You begin to trust that you are worthy of encouragement, that your struggles do not disqualify you from community, but draw you deeper into its heart. The courage to reach out, to admit need, to receive advice or correction, these become turning points on your path. In vulnerability, you find strength. In the willingness to be guided, you find new resilience. As you continue your journey, the gratitude for those who walk with you only deepens. Their presence is a living reminder that change is possible, that growth happens in relationship, and that freedom is a gift best celebrated together. You realize that one day you too may become a guide for others, offering your story, your scars, your hard-earned hope as a light for someone still searching for the way out. In this shared journey, you discover that true liberation is never a solitary victory, but a tapestry woven from countless acts of kindness, honesty, and steadfast love. With every step forward, the old impulse to hide grows weaker. You realize, almost with surprise, that the person you are becoming desires truth more than approval, substance more than appearance. The exhausting performance of wearing masks, showing one face to the world and another to yourself or to God, begins to lose its grip. There is a deep relief in letting go of pretense, in finally standing in the light, whole and unguarded. At first, honesty feels risky, as if the fragile peace you've begun to find might shatter if your flaws were truly seen. Years of living behind a facade have taught you to edit your story, to conceal weakness, to maintain an illusion of control and perfection. But now, the cost of hiding outweighs the risk of exposure. The double life, which once seemed necessary for survival, is revealed for what it is: a prison that keeps real connection, real healing, always out of reach. You start with small admissions, allowing yourself to acknowledge feelings you once buried: fear, loneliness, disappointment, longing. You bring them to God, not as obstacles to be hidden, but as truths to be spoken, shared, offered in trust. In the quiet space of prayer, you discover that honesty is not met with condemnation, but with kindness. You sense, perhaps for the first time, that you are fully known and fully loved, right where you are. This honesty begins to spill outward, touching your relationships. You find yourself speaking more plainly, less afraid of rejection or misunderstanding. You admit when you're struggling, instead of pretending you have it all together. The stories you once told to defend yourself, excuses, half-truths, deflections, are replaced with confessions that make space for real dialogue and growth. You learn that vulnerability draws others close, building trust where distance once ruled. Letting go of the masks is not a one-time event, but a practice, an ongoing commitment to resist the old urge to compartmentalize your life. You become more sensitive to the subtle ways self-deception creeps in, the rationalizations that threaten to split your heart in two. Each time you choose authenticity over appearance, you experience a quiet freedom. The anxiety of being discovered fades, replaced by a deepening peace that comes from knowing there is nothing left to hide. Gradually, you see how honesty changes everything. Your prayers become more real, your friendships more intimate, your sense of self more grounded. You stop measuring your worth by your ability to impress or your success at avoiding mistakes. You learn to accept both your strengths and your weaknesses as part of the same story, a story that is no longer divided, but unified by grace and truth. Living without masks does not mean you are without struggle, but now your struggles are met head-on, not concealed or denied. You stand before God and others just as you are, trusting that love will hold even the parts you fear are unlovable. In this space, double living loses its appeal, and you find joy in the simplicity of truth. Life becomes lighter, relationships deeper, and your own soul more at rest. What once was fragmented by secrecy and fear is now made whole by the courage to live honestly, to be known and loved in every part. There comes a day when the restless searching, the need to prove yourself or hide your wounds, slowly begins to subside. The ground beneath your feet feels firmer, and the anxious drive to chase after fleeting pleasures or escape old pain grows quieter. You notice, almost with wonder, a new kind of stability taking root inside. A peace that does not depend on circumstances, on the approval of others, or on the relentless pursuit of perfection. This is the quiet gift of trust, a gentle settling into a life shaped not by fear, but by faith. Trust, you discover, is not an abstract idea, but a daily practice. It is found in the willingness to let go of control, to accept that your journey is held by hands wiser and kinder than your own. You begin to sense the nearness of God, not just in the high points or the desperate prayers, but in the ordinary rhythms of your day. Each small act of surrender, each decision to lean into love rather than anxiety, becomes a step toward inner rootedness. The storms of life may still come, but they no longer uproot your sense of self or send you running for old escapes. There is an anchor now, a deep assurance that you are seen, cared for, held. This peace changes the way you see yourself and the world around you. The noise of comparison, the endless striving to measure up, gradually loses its hold. You feel less threatened by the successes or opinions of others, less shaken by setbacks and disappointments. The voice of shame is replaced by a steady reminder of grace. The fear of falling is overshadowed by the confidence that you are not alone, even in your weakness. You begin to savor the ordinary, a quiet morning, a simple meal, laughter with friends, the beauty of a familiar landscape. Life slows down just enough for gratitude to blossom, for joy to spring up in unexpected places. The longing for escape fades as contentment grows, rooted in the trust that every moment, even the painful ones, can be redeemed. The battles with old temptations lose their urgency, not because you have become immune, but because your heart is anchored elsewhere, in a deeper love, a larger story. This inner stability radiates outward, touching your relationships and your daily work. You respond with greater patience, listen with more compassion, forgive more quickly, because you no longer need to defend or justify yourself at every turn. Your sense of identity is no longer at the mercy of passing moods or the opinions of others. Instead, it rests on the unshakable foundation of being fully known and deeply loved. To be rooted in this peace is not to be free from struggle, but to walk through it with a quiet confidence. It is to know that setbacks will come, but they will not define you. It is to trust that grace will meet you in every season, that growth is possible even in the dark. This trust, grown slowly through honesty, surrender, and faith, becomes the soil in which your life flourishes. And as it deepens, you realize that the peace you once chased on the surface has finally found you from within, steady, lasting, and utterly real. As you look back on the long and winding path you've traveled, the battles fought in secret, the slow growth of wisdom, the victories and relapses, the grace that met you at every turn, you begin to sense that your journey is not just about you. The lens through which you see your own story widens, and the meaning of your struggle shifts. Where once life was measured by moments of pleasure or pain, by personal victories or stumbles, now you glimpse a bigger landscape, a place where your story fits within something infinitely larger and more enduring. The daily effort to resist fleeting temptations and choose what is true has trained your heart to seek what lasts. You begin to understand that each struggle with desire, each honest act of repentance, every small moment of courage and trust, has not only shaped you, but connected you to a greater purpose. The old questions, why me? Why this struggle? Give way to a quieter wonder. How is my life part of a story far beyond my own? You see how the lessons learned in darkness prepare you to bring light to others, how compassion grows from shared wounds, how real freedom is not only for yourself, but for those you touch along the way. Relationships become deeper, more honest, more precious. No longer driven by need or fear or the search for approval, you learn to love with open hands, to serve without resentment, to forgive without keeping score. The desire for quick satisfaction fades as you realize that real connection, lasting joy, and lasting peace are found in giving and receiving love that is not self-centered but self-giving. The patience you once struggled to muster in moments of temptation becomes the patience you offer others as they find their way. Your sense of identity shifts. You see yourself less as a collection of desires, failures, or even achievements, and more as a beloved participant in a story with meaning that stretches beyond your lifetime. The work of resisting temptation becomes part of a bigger calling, to become someone through whom goodness, truth, and mercy flow into the world. The things that once seemed so urgent, the hunger for validation, the avoidance of pain, the search for approval, shrink in importance as you grow aware of eternity pressing gently against the edges of every day. Even your sense of suffering is transformed. Where once pain seemed pointless and shame insurmountable, now you see how your brokenness has become a bridge, an entry point for grace, a place where others can find hope and healing. You become a living testimony that the darkness is never the end, that every struggle can serve a purpose beyond itself. Life, you realize, is not about perfecting yourself or escaping all hardship, but about learning to participate in a love that is larger than your own need. With this eternal perspective, your decisions gain new weight and new freedom. The choices you make, the way you love, the legacy you leave, they all echo beyond your own story, touching lives in ways you may never see. The meaning of your struggle is no longer hidden. It becomes a gift, a path of transformation not just for yourself, but for the world into which you are called. You rest in the knowledge that nothing is wasted, that every moment, surrendered, redeemed, and entrusted to God, has value in the tapestry of eternity. In this way, the fight against lust, the longing for freedom, the ongoing transformation of your heart are no longer private burdens, but become threads in a much greater design. You live with hope, with humility, and with a deep sense of belonging, knowing that your life matters not only now, but forever, woven into a story that will never end. And so the journey becomes your new way of being, not a destination reached, but a life continually unfolding. The battles you fought are no longer the secret shame of your past, but part of the honest fabric of who you are, woven with threads of perseverance, humility, and grace. The masks that once shielded you from pain and hid you from love now lie discarded, replaced by the gentle strength of authenticity. You no longer measure your days by perfection or failure, but by presence, by the steady, conscious choice to live as your truest self, open to joy, honest in struggle, rooted in hope. The habits of your old life, once automatic and unyielding, slowly lose their power. New rhythms grow in their place, not through sheer force of will, but through the simple repetition of better choices. You greet each morning with gratitude rather than anxiety, aware that freedom is built moment by moment, in the decisions you make when no one is watching. Even when temptations return, they no longer wield the same authority. You face them with clarity, with the memory of victories won, and the confidence that you are no longer alone or powerless. Setbacks are met with compassion, not condemnation. for you have learned that growth is found in persistence, not perfection.
Your relationships reflect this transformation. You listen more deeply, speak more honestly, forgive more quickly. The fear of being rejected for your weaknesses gives way to the joy of being accepted in your wholeness, strengths and scars together. You create space for others to be real as well, understanding that vulnerability is the doorway to connection, and connection the soil in which true freedom flourishes. Love becomes something you give and receive freely, unburdened by demands or pretense. In your daily life, peace becomes tangible, a steady undercurrent that sustains you through change, disappointment, and even pain. The old compulsion to numb or escape fades, replaced by a growing trust in the process of living fully awake. You savor the ordinary, the taste of food, the sound of laughter, the comfort of silence, the satisfaction of meaningful work. The world is no longer a threat to be avoided or a stage to be performed upon, but a place to be inhabited, explored, and cherished. Hope, once fragile and fleeting, now burns with a quiet resilience. It is not the naive optimism of wishful thinking, but the hard-won assurance that whatever comes, you are free to be yourself, anchored, loved, and unafraid. This hope is not dependent on circumstances. It survives disappointment, grows in hardship, and shines even in the face of uncertainty. You know that the journey will continue, that new challenges will arise, but you are no longer defined by your battles. You are defined by the truth that you are free, not because you are perfect, but because you are known, forgiven, and accepted. The path stretches on, but the burden is lighter, the road brighter. Each day brings fresh opportunities to live with integrity, to serve with compassion, to embrace the fullness of life as it comes. The freedom you sought is now the ground beneath your feet, the freedom to be real, to be present, to belong, to hope. And as you walk forward, you do so with the quiet certainty that the best is never behind you, but always ahead, waiting to be discovered with each brave, honest, and hopeful step.